dropping photography knowledge all day long, right? Yes. Welcome back to another broadcast podcast. My name is Keith B. Dixon. It's official. You are here, and I've got a great guest lined up for you today. Marcus Orelias. He is a local Bay Area artist. Genius? What do you think, Marcus? Would you say genius? Anyway, he's been able to really bring me up to speed on a strategy that I've been working for the last 8 months. And we're going to talk about that today, a social media strategy that basically puts you in a position of ownership. That's how I want to present this. It's going to put you in a position of ownership. You're going to own your social media with this strategy. And Marcus is going to tell you, how he does it and how he generated the most important thing. And what's that? Money. Yes. So Marcus Aurelius, tell us about that name, Marcus Aurelius. What does that mean from an artist standpoint?
Wisdom, intelligence, quality. You know that if my name is attached to something, it's going to be quality. It's going to be good and well thought out. So I'm born and raised San Francisco Bay Area. My whole life, music has subtly been telling me that I need to pursue it. So what that means is in school, I actually played 3 instruments. I played piano growing up, and then once I left piano, I switched over to trumpet temporarily, and then from there I went to baritone horn, and then in high school I played alto saxophone. So I played a variety of instruments. So I'm definitely not as fluent in music theory as I like to be, but I know a little bit of music theory. And then after high school, during high school, really, I started writing and recording music, rapping. Originally, I started doing poetry, and I was a part of a poetry club in high school. And we did slams, youth speaks here in the Bay Area. That's where I met a lot of people, a lot of writers, a lot of artists who are now doing their own thing. And then that eventually turned into rap. I saved up money, got a job when I was like 16, 17, just hustling. Worked at a restaurant, made a bunch of money doing that. Went and bought music gear and just self-taught myself how to record and how to navigate the music landscape. So that's a little bit on my music background.
And then what are your influences for an artist? What are some of your musical influences?
Definitely Michael Jackson. That's a gimme. Janelle Monáe, Tupac, Jay-Z.
Okay.
Just musical greats.
What about locally? You have any influences locally here?
A lot of the young guys, like a lot of people in my age group. And the reason I say that is because it's very competitive. Like it's a healthy competition. And I look at people like Callie J, who's a rapper from Fillmore. I see him doing his thing, and it inspires me to continue to push forward and come up with him. We have a very healthy relationship musically, and we push each other to do better and be better.
Okay. I kind of see music as being one of the hardest industries to promote yourself. Mm-hmm. I want to borderline on almost impossible to market yourself. Like, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many talented people out there.
Yeah.
Let's start to drill this down, because one of the things that I want to talk about today is your success that you've achieved with putting on shows and how you promote those shows. And I specifically want to talk about that from a social media standpoint.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, we're all artists and we're all independent business owners and creators. So tell us about the shows that you did.
Yeah, so I have to go a little bit back in the timeline, but when I was about 19, 20, I was living away from home. I had turned 20 years old. I had just finished my first project, which was called Rebel of the Underground. I released that in 2013, all financed by myself, no major label. I got BJ the Chicago Kid on there who signed to Motown. My guy Raginder, who's doing this thing internationally. Raginder, if you don't know, is a violinist, and he's also a producer. And he can sing low-key, and I keep telling him to sing and do a scene like an 808s and Heartbreak. But he's very talented, and you should check out his music as well. He actually just got featured on BBC Radio in an interview, BBC India, and a couple other local cats. And I just went in on my own dime and made that album. So I say that to say this. I turned 20, and what I had done was I was in the Bay Area. I was going around different places, different bars, and I noticed I wasn't getting booked. Because at the time, my social media presence, my internet presence was very different. Like if you search Marcus Aurelias, like nothing was coming up. And so what I said to myself was, I said, okay, nothing's coming up. Like I'm not getting booked. I just want to do my own shows. and that way I'm in control of the venue. I'm more in control of who shows up, et cetera, et cetera. And I also had learned that you have to be signed to a label to even get your foot in the door in some of these venues.
So when you say you're going to do your own shows, what does that mean? Tell us, drill that down. What does that mean?
So doing my own shows, what that meant for me was having creative control. And as artists, a lot of us seek creative control. And when you go and seek out a resource and somebody gives you a platform, you're often at the mercy of that person that's giving you, or you have to compromise. So what I said was, how many talented artists do I know? I know a lot of talented artists who may not have a platform, or may not have the safety net that I have, or the finances that I have to put, thousands of dollars into a show. So let me grab those guys who are hungry and who want to work. Let me find a venue, which we ended up finding Burial Clay Theater, which is a historically black theater. So, putting money back into the community.
Historically black?
Yeah.
Did you just say that?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. And tell us about that, Burial Clay?
Burial Clay Theater in the Fillmore District in San Francisco. Beautiful space. They support the arts. They support young black artists. They have Project Level in that building, which gives back to the community. So it was a perfect hub to do something like this. So I put that in order after searching various spaces. I worked with the people there. They were very nice and very accommodating to what we needed. And then I started hiring staff. So a lot of the artists, sometimes they bring artists or they bring people who are loyal to them. So it's kind of an influence sort of thing where it's like, okay, back to social media, you grabbing this guy or girl and this person has this much influence, they're going to bring their crowd. So people started bringing their crowd saying, hey, man, we heard what you're doing. We want to help. Is there a way that we can pitch in? Okay, cool. I need a stage director. I need this, and this. So people started falling into these roles.
So let's drill that part down about the social media.
Mm-hmm.
People that you were hiring had a social media communities or networks, or like what exactly did they have?
Followers.
Okay. And were they dedicated followers, reactive followers? People they knew?
Definitely dedicated. Definitely dedicated. And we could drill this down a little bit farther later on in the discussion. But what I noticed was that with their followers, they had loyal fans and they had people who want to see them successful.
So like a trickle-down effect.
Trickle-down effect. And I didn't have to work hard. All I had to do was find the top influencers that I knew in my circle and tap in and say, hey, would you like an opportunity? Nobody's going to say no.
Okay, so Burial Clay, let's talk money because money is always the barrier for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, it is the barrier of entry. Mm-hmm. How did you see that? I mean, where did your money come from? Did you you mentioned working?
Mm-hmm.
Because Burial Clay that's a big financial commitment.
Yeah.
How did you overcome that barrier?
The financial barrier, really, it's a layered answer. And the reason why I say that is because you got to hustle. Like as an artist, I mean, there's no other way around it. You have to hustle. And what that means is if you're not working a 9-to-5 job or you're not working some sort of job to pull in income, you got to be selling merch.
Mm-hmm. So you hire these people, you bring them in, they have influence. How does that, now I got to tell you, let me set this up for you guys. Marcus did a show at Burial Clay and all the seats were full and you actually sold tickets, made money. Did you have merch then too as well?
We did. See, a lot of this is, and at the time, when I first put out my album, I was 18, and I did the album listening. And at the time, I wasn't in the same headspace that I am now of entrepreneurship. So that actually went undocumented. So that was actually the first event. That was the test run. We did an album listening in a small studio, and we had a merch table. We had people come in and listen, and that was the test run for Burial Clay. Unfortunately, I didn't document it through photography.
That's interesting.
So the people that were there, they got that. That's like a memory. Like, oh, remember when Rebel Underground came out? And then fast forward to 20's a Difficult Age, which was my second studio album. The turnout was a lot bigger, so we grew.
Where did this idea of a test run come from?
It came from really just not having resources. And a lot of people say that as artists, when you're pigeonholed is when you're the most creative because you have to you're forced to figure out a way to make income.
That's powerful. Yes, I would have to agree. If you were talking to a photographer right now who has a ton of work and they want to get it out to some channel, whether it be social media or maybe doing a gallery showing, what would you recommend?
Um, look at your body of work and place value on it. And what does that mean to you? Oh, well, I feel like I should be in a gallery. I feel like I should be showing here. I feel like I should be doing it. Okay, well, how feasible is that dream or that goal?
Ooh.
Oh, it's very feasible. All right, well, if it's feasible, then you can start somewhere. See, a lot of the times, and this is a level of realism that you have to have. When people say be realistic, this is how I interpret it. I'm not saying that selling out Wembley Stadium is impossible. What I'm saying is be realistic and look at what's directly in front of you, because you have everything you already need to be successful with the level that you're on. So, and that's all I really did was put value on my product, which was my album. And I said, hey, you know what? If I can get 10 of my family members to buy my album for $10, that's $100.
That's powerful. But don't you think, in the grand scheme of Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, people are doing hundreds of thousands of or likes and follows and all those things that we just get ethered up about. Don't you think that's more important to be successful?
No. And the reason I say no is because likes is not a form of monetization. That just means you can get people's attention for 5 seconds. Can you hold their attention for an hour? Because when I did 20s of Difficult Age listening, that album is over an hour and 13 minutes, and everybody sat there and digested it, listened to it, and then turned around and asked deep, insightful, thoughtful questions about the project. Like, so it's that versus a 5-second like. A like doesn't necessarily equate to real life monetization. And what I mean is the people who support you are your customers. They're the ones that are gonna buy your product. So if you follow me on social media and you've been following me from the beginning, and I say, hey, I'm gonna do a show, I'm gonna do an album listening, and you're like, cool, I'm there. What's the details? Here's the details, right? That's because we've built a relationship. We have a rapport together.
Wow.
So when I get you to the actual space and you're existing in real life and I'm seeing you and you can reach out and shake my hand, we're now creating a relationship dynamic between the two of us that's more precious than a Facebook like, because I've seen it. I've seen people on Instagram, Facebook, scroll through their timelines, double tap and keep scrolling. They may not even be consuming what it is that you posted. They just maybe, by the sake of an algorithm, came across your picture and liked it or whatever. That doesn't mean that they're completely engaged. So by doing these events once a year, I'm boosting the engagement in real life.
That's a bold statement, and I've seen it. But I say I've seen it in your shows, the attendance. Tell us about your educational background.
So I'm very transparent. I went Catholic school I went to a Christian school from kindergarten to first grade. Then I transferred to Catholic school from second grade to fifth grade. Left sixth grade, went to a public school because there wasn't enough arts. I went to Hoover Middle School for sixth grade. Transferred back to Catholic school, 7th, 8th grade. Graduated to Stewart Hall, which is an all-boys school in San Francisco. Went there, enjoyed it, but it just, demographically, I was one of the token black kid. Let's keep it 100. And then I transferred to Gateway High School, 10th through 12th grade, and that's where I graduated. After that, I went to college at City. I went there. I have an interesting background. People look at my resume on paper, they're like, you're all over the place, but not really. But I went to City College, studied property management and real estate. Did that for 3 years, and then after there I left. And then in between all of that, from 8th grade into really I was about 20. I studied at American Conservatory Theater, and I graduated there. So that's where you get a lot of my speech and diction from.
Where does this knowledge of social come from? I mean, because this is intricate. This is not, in social media, we have the run of the mill information that people kind of bite on. This is, I would say, kind of like where the rubber meets the road, and we really start drilling it down. Where did that come from? Where's this dialogue coming from?
Entrepreneurship, the gurus, tapping into like Gary Vaynerchuk's and Ryan Leslie's of the world, being modest enough to listen. People such as yourself, I listen to your podcast, and really just really just being a student, and trying and failing. One of the things that, back to your question about the photographers who want to get their work out there, is I'm careful about the narratives that I say in public, because people will latch onto that, and sometimes they can't always decipher it for themselves and break down what it means for them. But no one's going to invest in you until you invest in yourself.
Word.
And when I do these shows, I'm not doing them because I want people to come and give me their money. I'm doing it to inspire people. So now I know when I do the next event, they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna be there because the last 3 was crazy," And to me, that's important. And to finish my point, entrepreneurship is trying and failing. And through failure, I've learned what to do and what not to do, and through failures of others as well, and successes of other people. So
wow. And how old are you now?
24.
Wow, that is. I wish when I was 24 years old, I had that mindset about technology. But then again, technology didn't really exist at this level, right?
Yeah.
But it's very impressive. What do your parents do? What drove that? What drove you to this point where you just understand technology as well? And we're going to deep dive on the social part of it, because I want to know how you filled up those seats without using mainstream social media. Yeah. So I definitely want to know that. Tell us about your parents and how that influenced you.
Well, my mom has always been an educator, and my dad is also an educator. And that's influenced me because I've always approached my endeavors with that intent to educate. It places value on what I'm doing. Like, I see a lot of people just doing stuff, and I'm like, that's cool. Like, I want to party too, but damn, you can't party all the time.
Right.
Eventually, you got to sit down and learn something. Eventually, you got to grow up. So my music is like wine. It ages with time. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I can definitely agree with that. You're ahead of your time for sure. Yeah, so education is definitely, you have to educate people. It's a value that people latch on to. So it's interesting to see. I don't know if you know that. There's actually a distribution model in social media.
I didn't know that.
And education is one of them.
I didn't know that. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. Speaking of distribution, when we think about distribution, there are a lot of platforms out there. And the one thing that I've noticed, because what I do is I go on and I vet people out, in terms of what they have in social. Yeah. And I noticed that you don't really have like a social. So it's a 2-part question. How'd you fill up seats with no social media, no mainstream social media? Yeah. And what's your thoughts on that, and why don't you have social like that?
Again, you just got to turn back the hands of time a little bit. I remember when Facebook came out. I remember when MySpace came out. Like, I remember when Napster was a thing. But let's be more modern. I remember when Facebook came out, and it was about 2007, 2008, and I only joined it because this girl told. I got this girl's phone. I was at this football game, and I had this flip phone, and I was like, "Yo, can I get your number?" She was like, "Do you have Facebook?" And I was like, "Nah, it was Facebook." And then she was like, "Oh," she was breaking it down to me. So I ended up joining Facebook, and I think just through the years, I just saw what it was doing to people in terms of like the science behind social media and just like the lack of communication. So in a way, I've become kind of anti-pro social media. And so I know it's relevant to like getting your face out there in certain ways or building a following, but I don't put all my stock into it either because I don't own the platform. And that's a whole nother thing I'm sure we're going to get into. But on the other side of that coin, how did I fill it up was hand-to-hand communication. And what I mean is I started with my immediate circle. I said, "Hey, mom, hey, dad, hey, sis, hey, brother, hey, cousin, I'm doing the show. Do you mind coming?" "Oh, yeah, I'm there. Whatever you need." Boom, that's 5 people. Then with there, I'm like, hey, can you invite like 2 people? Oh, it's good, bro. Again, back to influence, right? Everybody at least knows 2 people that's loyal to them.
I think it was Zig Ziglar or somebody that said everybody knows at least 200 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Everybody knows 200 people. I'm not going to ask you to bring 200, but bring 2 of your closest friends that you know ride for you. All right, cool. All right, it's good. Like, I'm going to bring Billy and Susan. Like, all right, cool. Boom. Now that's, do the math. Now that's 7 people. Right. And then those people bring people. So that's one of the business models that I approached. And again, going back to influence, I intentionally picked artists to do the show with me who I knew could draw a crowd. And I'm not talking about like a social media crowd. I'm talking about a real world, real life crowd.
Like literally they blow the horn and people come.
Exactly.
You know what's interesting? And I think you know this already. I used to produce a conference, a photography conference, and it was free. And we did it for 2 years. We'd bring in the best talent on the planet in Detroit, and it was very successful. And I think part of what I did was I used social media or live streaming a lot, probably more than I was obsessed with live streaming.
Yeah,
I'll say that. But one of the things that I did is I built a community of people. So I can definitely relate to that because I knew that I could count on those people. I could literally blow the horn and those people would come because they saw what my commitment was and the value that they were getting. And I saw the same thing for them. I saw their commitment level and their expectation for value. So I can totally relate to that. Let's drill back to, you mentioned science, the science of what Facebook was doing. What does that mean?
Nothing's on accident. Like everything is intentional with some of these businesses, and I mean that's their business. But I'm not gonna blow that open. You could do the research for yourself. But there's a science to it. There's a reason why majority of social media platforms are blue. There's a reason why you get a certain amount of characters. There's a reason why certain algorithms are incorporated or imagery. It's intentional. And I'm just a firm believer that if you want to be successful at something, you have to study every aspect of it. If you want to be successful at social media, you have to study every element of it. And one of the things I started seeing was, okay, let me keep it real. Like, I can't compete with the world's beautiful woman. Like, I can't compete with Beyonce and, Sports Illustrated models. And why? Not because I'm not as talented as they are, but because human attention span is already short. Then you have to factor in how many men are consuming, how many women versus how many women are consuming. What is it that the men are consuming for? So their attention span when they log in, they might go click on a model page because she's looking a certain type of way. So for me, what I started realizing was, okay, in the social media space, for the lack of a better term, it's a little bit of a cesspool. And I aesthetically, I cannot compete with some of the people that are on there. So what do I have to do as an artist to survive? I got to pull my audience away from social media and say, okay, I'm going to get the people that I know are showing up and start there and then have them do word of mouth. You got to pull your audience away from it.
Totally 100% agree. And people are going to probably struggle with that concept because the ideal of having so many people look at your content is arguable because we could say, the more people we have on the table, the more people we can affect. And yeah, we know some people are going to fall out. But not having a lot of people on the table, we're not going to be able to survive. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Not having that many people, you mean on social media?
Just in general, yeah.
Just in general. I mean, then your product, not to be brash, but your product sucks. Okay. Like, just be transparent. Like, if you cannot get people in real life to show up to your event, your product sucks. Okay. And it's time to go back to the drawing board and figure out, okay, what's something that people are going to enjoy? Yeah. And start in there. Yeah.
Okay. And do you think the validation for that is social media?
Oh yeah, it goes back to the science. You know, you get a like, them endorphins are firing off in people's brains. Okay. It's a I don't want to say a false sense of validation, because sometimes it is a healthy validation. Like if you do something great or you do something kind and someone puts it on there and says, hey, you know, this person bought this person a car because they were riding the bus every day, and then that gets 1 million views or whatever. Like that's a healthy validation. But a lot of what I see from my perspective, like I don't see it as balanced. You know, it's a place where people are competing for attention. So if you're an artist who takes your craft seriously, I would say pull your audience away from it, and then when you're able to pull those crowds, like you said, blow the horn, then the people on social media will come.
You know, I was watching a Casey Neistat video, and he was doing something for Beam, which was one of his brands that he was launching with CNN, and he basically was going to do this event at this dollar pizza place, and maybe like I'm gonna say maybe 50 people showed up. I'm gonna be generous, but I don't think it was more than 50 people. If you have, because he does millions of subscribers and millions of views on his page, and I've watched a lot of his content. I like it. It's he's a master storyteller, and it's funny to a certain extent. And he puts himself out there, so I respect that as an artist, because that's the number one rule as an artist. You got to put yourself out there and stand and basically stand up to the criticism with a smile on your face. That is the true sign of an artist. The thing that really kind of got my attention about that event was, if I've got millions of followers and 50 people show up, let's say 100, I'm going to be generous here, 100 people showed up. That's not, would you think that was a good number? No,
come on. No. Because it's like, it goes back to what I was saying about monetization. And I'm not trying to put him down, but because he, like you say, he got millions of followers, subscribers. But the true sign of success to me coming from a social media space is being able to sell out, or is being able to put butts in seats. And I mean, you could check my social right now. Like my social, the old Western movies, that Tumbleweed. Yeah. Tumbleweed. Yeah. That's my social media. But when I do events, people showing up. Yeah. More people are showing up to my events than that follow me on social media. And then, yeah, you could say, oh, well, you have ghost followers, or whatever. But I'm looking at the science behind them and say, how does this person have millions of followers, but 50 people are showing up, versus somebody who has 93 followers and I got damn near 195 people coming to my event? Yeah. I was pretty shocked, considering, I'm a diehard social media type. I study, breathe it. Yeah. So you mentioned hand to hand. I call it boots on the ground, right? You call it, and I do refer butts to it seats. As butts and seats, hand to hand combat, right? Yeah. Where'd that concept come from, the hand to hand combat, and how does it lead to ownership? Let's talk about those two things. So I don't want to say this without putting social media down, but social media is an illusion to me personally, in my reality. And the reason why I say that is because nothing's really changed in music over the last 30 years. I'll say 20, 30 years. And what I mean by that is social media has us to believe that all we have to do is take a picture and push a button and the work is over. It's not true. Anytime you look at movie studios, you look at record labels, you look at any corporate entity, they what is the first thing they talk about when it comes to money? Okay, how much is it going to cost to market this? Yep. First thing they say is, that's a great dream, we support you, but how much is it going to cost? Right? Even your parents say that. You say, hey, Dad, I want a car. How much is that going to cost? So when you look at you as a business owner, as an individual, as an entrepreneur, it's the same question. It doesn't change just because you're not Disney or Apple or Google or whatever, fill in the blank. No, you still have to ask yourself that question. How much is it going to cost? So I say that to say this, like when I say hand to hand, what I mean is that very much like in the 80s and 90s, we're specifically talking about hip hop and rap. A lot of rappers did what? Push CDs out their trunks.
Master P.
Master
Yeah.
P, hand in hand. Now, Master P mastered, no pun intended, he mastered the system and figured out how to sell records without actually selling records, which he's admitted to. Same thing with Cash Money Records. But that element is still there and it's still real of interpersonal relationships with fans, meeting people, hand to hand, getting out here, handing out your CD. I mean, CDs are, people say CDs are outdated. I worked in a record shop. CDs are not outdated. That's a narrative that people are driving because think of it this way. If you put all your information in the cloud and someone's stealing from you, it's harder to find who's stealing from you.
Right.
So that's a narrative to me that some of the corporations and record companies have created so that people can go over to streaming. Because if you don't own your music or you don't own your product, your painting, your photo, and you're going to the corporate institution and saying, hey, pay me, they might be taking 80% while you get 20, and when you really should be getting that 80 and they should be getting the 20.
Right.
So like I said, I worked in a record shop. FYE, they're no longer in business, and I watch people come in and buy $200 worth of CDs.
Okay, so let's address this.
Okay.
I'm gonna corner you.
Okay.
With capitalism.
All right.
I've invested money in R&D, created the platform, paid the people, and then presented the opportunity. That's probably every single major social networking and social media platform. Now I'm giving you free access to all these millions of people. If I take a majority of the money, that should be okay because you ordinarily wouldn't have had access to those people.
Right.
In an organic sense.
Right.
Or even come close to it.
Right.
So why are you complaining? That would be the question I would pose for you.
Well, then I would say my response to that would be, what are you in it for? Because anybody could be famous. Anybody can get it. The hard part is keeping it. The hard part is keeping it. They give it to you. They could take it away from you. And we've seen that time and time again. I mean, the list, I could write a book on it. How many people have been given stuff for it to be taken away? For me, and I'm going to speak from my experience, the satisfaction is knowing that I've had the same followers since I started, and they ain't going nowhere. Why? Because they believe in what I'm doing. They're like, he's going to make it one day. Like, I am somebody, and they see that. They're like, you may not be 1 million strong yet, but you will be, and I'm going to be here when you do it so I can say I was here from the jump. So to spin that is like, is what are you in it for? How much value do you see in your work? How much pride do you take in your photo or your music? And is that worth somebody putting their hand in your pot, pause, metaphorically,
right,
and robbing you or taking your money? And if as an artist, if you say that's cool, then that speaks volumes. If you're like, no, I want to own because there's residuals here. I got family, I got kids, and I want them to eat off of my picture or eat off of my masters. Well, there you go. There's your answer.
Wow. And then you mentioned sphere of influence or your sphere. Realtors call that the sphere of influence, and that's something I think a lot of good real estate companies train their agents on is go to the people you know right away. I know it sounds cliche to a lot of people, but I've seen and even heard you say, hey, look, I'm doing this event starting with your family members. Tell the whole world I'm doing this event and do it. So do you feel that that's still the way to go? Like, how do we obtain ownership, and does it happen quickly? Like, drill that back for us.
I have a friend. His name is Stefan Marcellus. He was on NBC's The Voice, and he got eliminated, but he ended up going on and releasing a project called Redemption. And one day I was like having a text message conversation with him, and I was reading this book about the music industry and about like masters and whatnot. And I took a picture of it and I sent it to him because he's an independent artist. The reason why I did that was because I believe in there's only two types. There's two types of people in this world: people who know and people who don't. And the difference between those two people is the people who know are more likely to be successful because they know. So what I'm saying to artists and what I'm saying to the people listening is, if you want to be successful, you have to know. If you wake up and you say, I want to be a photographer, you have to know, what does that mean? Who's the top of the photography industry? Like, what's the history of photography? Do you know about the first camera ever made? That's why I call myself hip hop's historian. It's a double entendre, because it's like I know hip hop history, but it's also I'm very into ancient cultural history. Right. So it's like you have to know the field that you're going into. If you don't know about video games or you don't know about graphic novels, don't do it. You're gonna embarrass yourself, unless, like you said, you tap into that sphere of influence and you say, hey, I may not know about graphic novels, but you know what? That guy over there knows. I'm going to, ask him to come help me. It's not that I'm using him. Right. It's just that, hey, we're having a conversation, we're having a dialogue. He says he's healthily, he wants to help. We agree that, hey, this is our vision. We get it in paper or whatever works for you. And you sit down and you break bread. Because now you have someone in your corner who knows what they're doing. So when you slip up, they can cover you, or vice versa.
That's interesting. And I would have to agree with you on that. When we think about making money, mm-hmm. if I said to you, Marcus, as an artist, I want to make money. Mm-hmm. I want to be an artist. What's your response to that?
Don't be an artist.
You're stealing my answer. I tell people that all the time. Right? Yeah. If you want to make money, don't be an artist.
Yeah,
right?
Don't be an artist. Like I heard a radio personality say, when you talking, God is in the room, you talking about your dreams, and as soon as you start talking about money, God leaves the room. Yeah. Money as an artist, you have to find balance. That's what I'm saying. There's a difference between people who know and people who don't know. You have to find balance, and that's the key with information and wisdom, whatever you want to call it. And finding that balance is saying, okay, I have to learn to separate the art from the business.
Because that was my question coming up. And in my life, I like to say, I'm an artist. I survive mm-hmm. on photography. Anything that I create, that's what I'm surviving on. There's no other job or income. Yeah. Right? I don't create balance in my life. Mm-hmm. I need to be full tilt on, not one foot in, one foot out. Not I'm going to take a vacation because I work really hard. Yeah. I'm working really hard up to the point where my body and my mind says, okay, it's time to stop or slow down. Yeah. And I'm taking a break, a great one. Yeah. Right? A great vacation. I'm going to live it up. Mm-hmm. First class this, first class that. Mm-hmm. So I don't necessarily believe in balance, but I do believe as an artist mm-hmm. that you have to create balance between being an artist and a business person, or you're not going to survive. What's your thoughts on that?
I agree with you 100%. Like, that's all I was saying, was creating balance between business and being an artist. And I agree with that statement, because in everything you said, because you have to be all in. Like, artists are the most delusional people on the planet. Like, you think, think about this. Our job is to think of something and take what we see in our head and create it. Like, I'm going to create a piece of metal that flies and call it an airplane. At one point, that was radical. Like, that's a radical idea. It's never going to happen. And you have to, like you said it earlier, you have to get used to standing up in the controversy. And you have to get used to being attacked. You have to get used to people thinking you're crazy to be an artist. So I'm just saying that to say, I agree with you. Like, there has to be a balance. And in that, you have to educate yourself on your field. And then within that information that you have, create balance. And that's why, people will say there's no money in music. Well, that's not true. There's no money in music to people who aren't educated on how to make money.
Oh, that's deep.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And that's why you'll see artists saying so-and-so is suing this label or Spotify because they're owed millions of dollars. You don't own your music. That's all that tells me. See, I'm educated. I'm not a fool. I'm educated with it. So when people say things, they telling on themselves. Yeah. I'm like, okay, whoever's art album sold 1 million copies, but you suing a label saying they owe you millions of dollars. That means you don't own your product. Because if you owned it, you would be eaten. You would have reaped the residuals from the album sales. So music sells. It definitely sells. It's just people are not in positions of ownership to where they're able to get the benefits of their music selling.
Okay, so let's shift gears here. I want to talk about something important. Let's talk because we're talking about money. How do you get people? I think the capacity in the theater was how much?
195 people.
195. How do you get? Because every seat in there was full. The place was packed. How do you get 195 people into an auditorium? You're not on television. We talked about your social media. There's no billboard ads. There's no promotional budget. How do you get 195 people to show up, buy tickets, and download your album and buy merch? How does that happen?
That's a dynamic question, but yeah, like I mean, it's about interpersonal relationships. It's as simple as that. Like literally going through your phone book, and let me say this: scientifically, it's been proven you can only manage, I think, like 50 people or something like that. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's only a certain number of people that you can manage as an individual, and to get 195 people into a theater without all the things you said is really about influence. It's about it's about the art, like looking at your art and saying, again, like you said earlier, what value is in my art? What am I teaching people? What's the education? Am I connecting with people on an emotional level?
I have to agree with you. You know, that's a very interesting statement. I don't know if you know the science behind the 50 people, but I don't. And maybe you've heard this. I started a community called the Bomb Squad. It was originally called the Bomb Squad. It's now the name is now changed. It's retired, but and I retired it because I just felt like it had reached the pinnacle of what it was going to be. The limit. The capacity of that community was 300. And my thinking behind that was I could only manage 300 people at the most. And we only had 300 seats in the auditorium that we were holding our event in. So I figured if I got extra people, because not all 300 are going to show up, I know that, but I'm pushing every day out into the world this concept and this value. I'm gonna sell this conference out, and we did both years. It was oversold every year. When you think about getting people in and spending money and in a relationship, how do you keep them fed? Because that's going to be the question. Okay, I got them here. What do I do now?
Presentation, proper preparation prevents poor performance. Like when you come to my show or you come to my event, it's quality. You know what I mean? That's what it's about how you carry yourself. I've done damage to my brand. Don't get me wrong. Like I've said things that I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have said that or did that. But I'm young still. Like I'm figuring out like the next person. I think everybody should have room to make mistakes as long as you're not hurting other people or physically doing something wrong to someone else. But I've created a brand of quality, like even in the quality of, the images from the shows. Like when I post up the images, like I have professional photographers there, like shooting. Yep. And then people post on their iPhones or whatever, but like I don't have somebody with an iPhone taking my photo. Like it's quality. When you come to the shows, you're gonna see professionalism. It's ran like a Jay-Z and Beyonce concert. The merchandise is quality. Like when you look at the merch, you feeling it like, wow, like this is, I know people to this day that still wear merchandise from 5. I haven't made merchandise in 7 years, and people still wear merchandise from 7 years ago.
Wow. Your last show was actually at an art gallery. Can you talk a little bit about that and the idea behind it?
Yeah. So my last event was at R.O.T.U Division in San Francisco. It was on Mission, and Mission's pretty long in San Francisco. But where I had it at night, it dies down, and you can get parking and everything there. So it was an ideal location, and it was across the street from a government building. So nothing funny was going to go on. But I had it at R.O.T Division because I like the energy there. It is an art gallery, so they support artists. When I did my first album, Rebel Underground, we actually had it in a studio as well, but it was a much smaller studio. And so with the album, for the second album, it's a grand album. So I wanted to have a grand space. And so we catered from a local spot here in the city. We rented props to, again, the quality. Like, how many listenings have you gone to and there's props?
Right.
That's my theater background. So it's like incorporating these experiences that I've had and creating a brand that is Marcus Aurelius. And it's like people come in, they see the props, they see the merch table, they see the food. They're like, wow, I've never been to something like this. And it's creating an experience. It's creating a sensation. So when I do the next event this year, you're going to say, oh, I'm going to go to that. Because that's going to be an experience. That's like, I want you to come. If you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, if you're in the Bay Area, like present, I want you to come to my events because you're basically coming to get inspired. So to your question about the merchandise, I try to infuse inspiration into like everything I do. So when you take home a piece of merch, you're taking home a memory, you know.
Financially, how did you do with that show? Did you break even? Did you make money? Like,
oh, we made money. We made a lot of money. I'm not gonna say I was taught not to state private numbers in public,
right.
but we made a lot of money. We pretty much sold out of like all the merch that I had, and I still have some merch, but yeah.
And here you have no YouTube channel that's breaking records, and to be fair, you're probably making more money than a YouTube person. Probably in that day.
In one day. And the other thing is too is like I design my own merch. I design I'm versed in Photoshop. Like there's nothing I can't do. Like I'm not a jack of all trades to the point where I'm a master of none. But there's nothing I can't do. Like
so you're controlling
controlling every element of distribution. If you see a photo outside of the photographer that took it, like the photographer that took it owns the photo, right?
Right.
Like the actual residual, but I own the creative commons to it. Right. So I'm able to distribute however I want. So it's like on every element as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, I own every element of myself. So why would I go to a label and sacrifice that?
Interesting. So a while back, you put this bug in my ear, and you guys know that I just created an agency called Spark Social Group, and one of our underlying strategies is to own your content. So we push podcasts, we do live streaming, we call them shorts, and just a lot of content along those lines that you own and control. You put that bug in my ear, Marcus, and let's talk a little bit about ownership and controlling, because you said, well, if it's on that platform, you're not really controlling how people are seeing it and all those things you mentioned to me. Well, how do we get it out there? I know you have a mailing list that because I'm on it and I see it, right? And I might not click on it. I don't have to because it's there, right? But I see that, and it's almost like a psychological tick, like something's going on with him. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so originally I was on the superphone. Ryan Leslie had a superphone, or he has a superphone, which is like a port number. And before that, they had a port number company. I can't remember what it was called though, but it wasn't revolutionized to the point where it is now. And what you'll see in technology, Gmail, all these things, is they're starting to catch on to this. And it's actually interesting because I ran into a music industry person, I'll say, and we were talking about it, and he works for a really big music industry person, and we were talking about the future of music and the future of labels. And if you pay attention to it, a lot of distribution is shifting to this model of ownership, and the artist owning, the individual owning the catalog, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what I took into account was that if I post something on Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, they own that content. It's on their websites in the fine print, which is why sometimes you'll see celebrities that they'll have the copyright. Like Kim Kardashian, she'll have the Kim Kardashian West at the bottom of her photo because Instagram owns your photo. And here's a double side to that, right? Is because I do know that people make a living off social media. If Instagram crashes or Twitter crashes, so do you. Your business is gone. My sister told me that we were having a conversation. She was like, Marcus, you have to keep existing in the real world. Don't put too much stock in the internet.
But let me play devil's advocate here.
Mm-hmm.
Facebook has millions of subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
Instagram has millions of subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
The chances of them going away,
No.
slim.
Yeah,
Maybe.
of course.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want them to go away. I don't want social media to go away. Because they're a great teaching tool for those of us who are willing to listen and learn and be students. And yeah, they're great. They're great teaching tools. And I think one of the things in being a student is you learn that a lot of social media has algorithms, and algorithms are based on what they feel is important. Relevancy. So for somebody like me who doesn't have a history of posting and, venting and ranting on Instagram, I'm not relevant to Instagram. I'm relevant to the people who support me, though. So what I did was I had a port number to bring it back to me. I had a port number, and then I kind of just let it go for a little bit, just because of the amount of work. But it was working. Like, I built a database, but then I also started a mailing list as well, just as a backup. So I know first name, last name, email, address, like where they're from, whether or not they open the email. And it was just a little bit of a step back, because what I noticed too was doing the port number, like sometimes you would catch people when they didn't want to be talked to.
Right.
And they're like, yo, stop texting me. Like, and you like, all right, cool. It's not personal. It's just like you hitting them so direct, and people aren't used to that, that you kind of have to step back and just be like, all right, let me just go to the email because that seems to be working. And at the time, I had 212 people. I have 398 people now likes on my Facebook page. And it's gone down because people deactivate their Facebook. They delete their Facebook, whatever. And out of that 212 people just on the mailing list, I've gotten above half of those people to open.
Wow. That is a phenomenal open rate, because on social media, to get a like or a share or some type of, I'm just going to say share, it's 1%. 1% is considered good.
Wow.
And I can remember, so I spoke this year in Nashville to a group of 800 photographers. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I mentioned to them was, if you're going to be successful when you're networking, because it's really about networking, not social networking as much as it is about networking. If you're going to be successful, the quickest and the fastest thing you can do is create an email campaign, because you're going to get higher open rates. And you're also going to get those higher turn rates where people are going to convert and buy something from you.
Yeah, and what I noticed was the engagement rate is higher whenever I'm giving people a product. And what that shows me is that people want a product from me. Whereas if I just email out about, the sky is blue, the conversion rate is going to be less. So for me, it's a good gauge on like where my influence is in right now in society, and among the people that actually like support what I'm doing.
So the law of diminishing return, familiar with that at all?
Yeah.
Okay. I kind of see social media as being the law of diminishing return. The more you do it, the less you get back over time. And would you agree with that? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I actually have this theory that if you didn't exist before social media, you won't survive social media. Meaning, if you look at Beyonce, right? Beyonce will survive because she existed before social media. So for her, it's just an asset. Like, she don't need it. She could do a concert right down the street. People going to show up.
Right.
Whereas younger people or people who are coming up on social media, and when I say existed, I mean you started your craft. Like, if you started your craft during the era of social media, like, and that's the first thing you did, you're existing in this era. Now, if you were doing it before, you could exist outside of it, because you can pull from somewhere, right, and say, oh, I remember what it was like before this. Whereas some of the younger generation, some of the younger people, I'm young, I'm 24, but like some of the younger people, they can't pull from that. So that's all they know. And like you said, the law of diminish of return, like it applies to everybody. And that's people's attention span, and like, man, this person's boring now.
People lose interest.
They lose interest.
So you're a firm believer in you have to re-innovate yourself. Like, what's your thought? I call it the mindset reset. You got to reset and do something different, innovate.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Reinvent myself in like my image, like my look. Every album, every album cycle, I do a different look, and that's from studying the greats. Like every great entertainer, every great artist has reinvented themselves every album cycle. And then I also still believe in mystery. Like a lot of the media that we consume now, there's no mystery behind it. It's like eating your grandmother or your parents' food. Like, you're like, Mom, what's in this? Your mom be like, you're not gonna know. Like, yeah. And then you get older, and you're like, oh, she was just putting cinnamon and you know. Right. But it's the magic, it's the illusion, not necessarily in a negative way, but it's just in a way of creating a mystery. Like, no, don't burn yourself out. You know, in my mind, like, I feel like if I keep doing music, I'm gonna be around 20 years from now because I'm pacing myself. And a lot of rappers are just giving out content. They're just every year they giving you an album. But the difference between the 90s and now is in the 90s you actually have to go get an album. Like, you have to get up, go to the store, commit yourself to that. Now it's like, you know how many albums come out on a daily basis?
That's real talk, and it makes complete sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people are just doing things to do things.
Mm-hmm.
You guys, we are recording actually on the 4th of July.
Yeah.
Literally on the 4th of July. And as you might hear some fireworks going off in the background and sirens. Matter of fact, I'm going to deviate just, I call it a sidebar. As I'm driving to the location where we're doing this podcast, there was actually a fire. There was a McDonald's that caught on fire, which was kind of interesting. So, what a way to set off the 4th of July, right?
Right.
Okay, so Marcus, we're going to go ahead and close out. But before we do, I have a few more questions for you. And I got to tell you, I've really enjoyed this. I mean, I'm really impressed. And I think the listeners are going to definitely take home a lot of value here. Here's one question I wanted to, if I had nothing, I got nothing. My product is pretty good. What do you recommend I do to really get traction?
When you say you have nothing, you mean like no followers, no nothing?
Yeah. I'm just starting my business.
Okay.
What do you suggest?
Create a business plan first. What I mean is, like, a lot of times when people start businesses, they jump on social media and they create like accounts, and then I've seen it time and time again. Oh, I'm gonna start a record label, and then they create a social media, and then it's dead. And they never use it. Create a business plan. Like Google, you can literally Google business plan template, and they'll give you a business plan template, and write out a business plan. Even if it's just like 10 years from now, I want to be able to sell 100 tickets. You know, that's pretty bad, but you know, right. You do your own math. And then once you do that and you're clear on your goals, I want you to write down maybe 5 to 10 people who you know will show up and support you and or follow you on social media. But if social media is not your thing, or if you feel like, I don't know, 5 to 10 people who would show up and support you. If you could write down 10 people, you're in good shape.
Okay. Can I troll you a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to troll that answer a little bit because I know somebody's out there. I'm going to beat them to the punch, right?
Yeah.
I was listening to a Navy SEAL. It's Master Chief ONeill. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He assassinated Osama bin Laden. He's talked about it openly. He's got a book out. And I don't want to promote that. I don't like to promote violence. And he openly talks about assassinating him. And as I'm listening to him, he's talking about the mission that they're going out on and not coming back. That was their thing. This is what we signed up for. You know, this is for the good of country. Let's do it. But he said something that really kind of stuck to me, and that was, as well trained as they were and as calculating, and they do game theory and all this kind of stuff, their intel, a plan does not work.
Yeah.
Even the best conceived plan. He said everything that they planned did not work. They didn't plan on a helicopter crashing. They didn't plan. They breached a door, and the door comes off, and there's a brick wall there. Nothing is as it seems.
Sure.
So if we create this plan, how does it relate to everything that I just said?
Well, a business plan is not for the world. It's for you. It's a roadmap. It's a blueprint. So when you all in, you sleeping out your car or whatever, you go back to that business plan, you reminded why you started. Sometimes you can't always refer to the content you create, because sometimes that lies to you too. Like, you could be rapping about, like, I'm rich, I got money, and that's not your reality. So that business plan for me is just a blueprint, and being able, it's not even really to follow unless you really have somebody investing in you and they want to see a business plan. Then you actually have something you can show them. So that, I mean, it's a double whammy there, but it's just more of like a reminder of why you started. And I'm a firm believer that nothing ever goes according to plan in life. How can it? Like, nobody can predict where their life is going to be. People who are deceased probably thought they would be here today. So you just never know. But the lesson is to always be prepared. You got to stay ready so you ain't got to get ready. Yeah. And that's what I would say to a lot of artists is, like, stay ready so you ain't got to get ready. Educate yourself so nobody's educating you in terms of taking advantage of you and giving you false information.
So I got my 10 people because I followed your advice. What do I do next?
You get your 10 people, you get your product, and you find a space that you can occupy. You find a space that you could live in, and you invite those 10 people. You tell those 10 people, hey, can you do me a favor and invite 2 people or bring 2 people, and you do the event. What's
that conversation? Let's just play along with it.
Yeah.
I'm not that great at networking. What do I say to that? I'm one of your 10 people. What do I say to my friend? How do I communicate what you do?
Yeah, you say, hey, I'll just say John as an example. Hey, John, as you know, I'm doing photos, taking my time to become a photographer. I have a great collection that's been vetted, that's I worked hard on, that I put my blood, sweat, and tears into, and I want to do a gala. I want to do a showing. Sorry if I don't know the terminology for photographers. I'm not a photographer, but I want to do a gallery. John's like, all right, man, yeah, I'll support you. You say, all right, cool. So yeah, I'm going to be doing this venue. It's going to be dope. And I was just wondering if maybe you wouldn't mind bringing a couple people, just so we can, I could be exposed to as many people as possible. Oh yeah, man, I wouldn't mind doing that. That's how it's worked for me. Right. For me, and just having that collective of people, and I call them a team. Eventually that team becomes people that work for you in the company.
Right, it's your personal sales team.
Yeah, and you sit with your sales team. Thank you for that verbiage. I didn't.
That's not outdated, is it?
Sales teams?
No, just that concept that we're talking about. Is it outdated?
No, it ain't never outdated, and not until humanity falls off the end of the earth.
Why is that?
Because people don't change. Like people, for the most part, do not change. Their human nature does not change.
Okay, so I know I said I had 2 questions.
Yeah, it's okay.
I'm going to wipe my other question off the board because we're talking about language here. You piqued my curiosity. You said people don't change.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I spoke at the American Marketing Association's chapter down in North Carolina, Mindset Reset, and I said in front of hundreds of people don't change.
No, they just adapt.
And they cringed. Yeah. Like, you just see people in there like, what do you mean people don't change?
Yeah. No, people don't change. They just adapt. And what I mean is, like, okay, if you sleep around, right, or you're a cheater, you get married, you just adapt. So I'm like, man, I can't be out there the way I used to be. But at the heart of it, you're not necessarily a cheater, but you still look at other women like, dang, she fine. You know what I mean? Right. So you just learning to adapt. And that's what business is, learning to adapt to anything.
So that person is still a cheater. They just adapted.
Yeah, like I'm like, a leopard's always going to be a leopard. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. It's just adapting to the where you're like maybe not as threatening, Right. And some things, we can't act as if actions don't have consequences like they do. Right. And that's for the individual to decide, like, is it worth risking everything I have for this? Yeah. If the answer is yeah, then by all means do it. But that's up to the individual, to me. So if they have a whole thing called psychology. You people get degrees in it. If you study psychology, like, okay, human beings can only make up to, X amount of choices a day. And then after that, the brain just goes and it stops working. So if okay, people can only make this many choices a day, I'm going to mold my business around now. I'm going to mold my business around human emotion, or I'm going to invoke some sort of emotion in this marketing campaign. So that's been used since the beginning of time. And I mean, even if you look at the music industry, originally music was made to sell a product. You know, you look at somebody like RCA. They weren't even a record label when they started. And what they discovered was if we put a jingle to it, people are more likely to buy it.
You know what's interesting? You brought up RCA. Mm-hmm. I want to bring up Lego.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know this. They know the product Lego. Mm-hmm. Lego has over 900,000 people in their own community on their own website. They have personal profiles with, you know, all the same features like likes and all that kind of stuff. It's like a spinoff of Facebook. Mm-hmm. If any one of these platforms, because you remember AOL, MySpace, and all those.
You got mail. Yeah.
Those were the biggest of all time. We never thought that. I remember being back east in D.C., just right outside of D.C., and seeing the big old AOL building, and just like, wow, that's it right there. Now it's kind of gone.
Now it's gone.
Right.
But you said something that's important, which is they have Lego learn something from that. Like, they have people on their team that study other businesses. Like, they study, like Warren Buffett. I was listening to this podcast, and they said Warren Buffett reads about the Detroit crash. He reads about it, and one day someone asked him, like, why do you do that? And he was like, because I need to know where the pitfalls are. Like, I need to know how they failed to be successful. And that's what I tell artists. Like, one strategy I use, I listen to bad albums. Yep. And people are like, why do you do that? I'm like, because I need to know what to avoid.
That's an interesting concept, because I've always looked at, I remember mentoring with photographers, and I was like, oh, I would never do that. I'm never going to do that. And I think I took more away in terms, I mean, there's things I gained that were positive, but the things that I really focused on was the negative things. Like, I'm not going to treat my clients that way. I would probably do this a little differently. Yeah, it becomes like, matter of fact, this is disastrous, and I probably shouldn't use this as an example since I'm getting ready to get on an airplane. Yeah. But they study airplane crashes in great detail because they don't want
that to happen.
They don't want it to happen.
You're more likely to get hit by lightning, though.
Yeah.
Statistically, than getting a plane crash.
Yeah.
And they just, is when planes crash, they buff it up so much that you like, oh my God.
Yeah, because it's so controlled.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And I've learned more from my own failures than I have anything. I gotta tell you.
Yeah.
Failures in people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Marcus, thank you so much. How do people find you? How do we get on your mailing list, or how do we connect with you?
Can I just say this one thing?
Sure.
I meant to say it, but I forgot. With the Lego statement that you made about the 900,000, if you're an artist, build a community. That's what that's what I've been meaning to say. It just keeps slipping my mind. Like, even when you're talking about the show, you're like, how do you get people to show? Build a community. Even if it's on your website, like, have a portal where people can log. Like, just figure out how to create a community within your own art, and people will show up. But where people can find me is to add themselves to the mailing list. If you go on R.O.T.U worldcompany.com, it's all one word. And on the first page, the very first page, if you scroll down, it's easy, less than 3 clicks, because you know they say if it's more than 3 clicks, they ain't gonna do it. Yeah. So, homepage, scroll down, fill out your information. There's a disclaimer: I don't share your information. We don't share your information. Boom, you're on the mailing list. It's that simple. Or you could just Google Marcus Orelias. All my social media is there. Less than 3 clicks. Follow me, add me, do whatever. And I look forward to definitely connecting with more people and seeing more faces.
You've taught me a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Peace. All right, there you have it. Keith B. Dixon. It's official. Marcus Orelias. Thank you so much for listening. And you guys, be sure to subscribe. That means a lot. It definitely means a lot. I know that space on your hard drive, space on your phone. I know it's critical. I know it's valuable. Go ahead and subscribe and download. You can also find me on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. I'm there. Keith B. Dixon. Everything is Keith B. Dixon. Thank you guys for listening. I will talk to you on the next one. Peace.